Hey everybody! Today I'm going to be looking at Minema. It's probably one of my favorite new mods that has come around. It's not that new, but it's new to me, and I've been using it for the past few weeks now, and I love it. If you've remembered some of my old videos I did on my old channel, such as my Metastasis Minerva, that's how you say it. That was a video in Half-Life 2 that I recorded at 2400 frames per second, and then blended the frames back together to give motion blur. Now this is sort of the same type of deal. Minema is a tool that will slow down the game world and the game engine in order to keep at a consistent frame rate. So the point of this mod is that, let's say you have a huge world. Let's say I fly up in the air a little bit. You have a huge world, and let's say I set my view distance to extreme. I'm using Optifine, and my frame rate's probably going to tank. But this is a huge amount of chunks. So I'm getting 35 frames per second right now. It may drop to 20. I am running some anti-aliasing, so that helps drop it. So let's say you're doing, a simple pan shot, and you want to have these huge view distances, but you don't really have a powerful computer, or like me, you have a powerful computer, but it's still incredibly hard to do. And this is going to take a few minutes to load the chunks. So with Minema, you can just go into a configuration file and set your desired frame rate. In my case, I use 120 because most of my projects are either 24 FPS or 30 FPS. But to use those frame rates, you need to use a multiple of 20 for the most smoothness. So this is actually still loading here. The game engine runs on a 20 tick cycle. Most games use a tick system, so it's almost like you could think of it like a frame rate for the game engine in a way. A lot of games use these type of systems. So Half-Life 2 is either 33, 66, or 100. You probably remember if you've played Counter-Strike, sometimes you're meant to set like CL, CMD rate, that type of thing. Any of the source engines use that. With Minecraft, you have a 20 tick rate, so 20 ticks per second. It's like I said, it's almost like a frame rate in the game. So with Minema, you want to use a multiple of 20. You can see my frame rate tanking right here as it's loading more and more of the game world, and it still has a lot to go. So to use 24 FPS, because you want to use a multiple of your final frame rate, so you'd use 120 frames per second, because that's divisible by 20, and it's also divisible by 24, because 120 divided by 24 is 5. It's really easy. That's another reason why 120 Hz TVs are popular, not just because you can show 3D, but because if you're showing movies at 24 frames per second, each frame is on the screen as much as any other frame. So one frame of a 24 FPS movie is shown 5 times, 5 frames worth, and then the next one, the next one, the next one. Most screens at 60 Hz have to show the frames for different amounts of time. That's why 24 FPS video on a 60 Hz screen, like a normal television, sometimes have some skipping. Not much, because normally the hardware has a way to sort of buffer it out in a way. But still, it's not ideal. That's the purpose of 120 Hz screens, for the most part. You want to have a multiple of 20 so it fixes any stuttering in the game, but at the same time you want to have a multiple of your final frame rate. So let's say you're shooting at 30 FPS. You could shoot at 60 frames per second with the capture, because then that's a multiple of 20, it's a multiple of 30. And I'll show you how to configure those options in a little bit. So I'm still loading this world. My frame rate is down to 25. And so let's say I was capturing a video and I wanted, this really smooth playback. I would have to use Minema in this case. And it's really easy to use. So first of all, I'm going to show you how do we install Minema. It's very easy. Okay, so first of all, you should go to the Minema page on minecraftforum.net, download the latest. Right now it's 1.41, which you'll see in the video title. And all you do, check this out, you take the zip from your downloads, drag it into mods in your .minecraft directory. Now, you need a mod loader for this. Mod loader uses a particular mod, little folder here, for it to work. I happen to be using 1.4 right now, but I'm going to go ahead and clean up my config, and we can start fresh of configuring your Minema configuration file. Alright, so I got rid of Minema 1.4. We just have 1.41 here. I'm going to go into config, and you'll see Minema right here. I'm just going to duplicate this so we can have a reference. This is my original one. And we're going to delete Minema. I'm going to load up Minecraft so it'll create a new one. Alright, so let's check out what all this stuff does. Okay, so this is the Minema configuration file. I'm only going to show the things I've personally tested. Capture frame rate. This is where I was talking about before. It says right here, because Minecraft operates at 20 ticks per second, frame rates with a multiple of 20 are recommended for best smoothness. So, if you want to record at 24 frames per second, capture 120 for maximum smoothness. If you want to record at if you want your video to be 30 frames per second, record at 60 frames per second. Basically, when you put it in your rendering program or encoding program, editing program, whichever, it'll end up taking out every other frame, or it will blend every 2 frames together. So I usually set this to 120. That's enough for me. Okay. Record frames of multiple tiles for very high resolutions, such as 4K, 8K when enabled. The GUI and the player view model can't be recorded in this mode. Warning, experimental feature, crashes on desires, blah, 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 blah. I use true, and I will explain why. Basically, some of you may have heard of a term called super sampling. Super sampling was the original type of anti-aliasing. So aliasing is what happens when you try to display a calculated image or a curvy, smooth line on a screen which has a finite number of pixels. Now, technically speaking, all screens will have a finite number of pixels, at least in my mind there should be. I don't think we'll have infinite resolution anytime soon. But a good way to think about super sampling is, let's say you're in Minecraft actually, and you're making pixel art. So what happens when you make a really big pixel art, and say you squint your eyes? What happens? It looks sharper, right? It looks like it has more information and it's less blocky. That's kind of the idea behind super sampling. Instead of some fancy type thing in code, what happens is it basically just renders a really high resolution image and then scales it back down. Another way you can think of this is sort of forcing more spatial information into a lower quantity of pixels. So here we can see a particular screenshot in Minecraft with no anti-aliasing. This is what you guys are normally playing at. This was a 1080p screenshot that I zoomed in. Next, we're going to see 8 times MSAA and then 4 times super sampling transparency AA. So you have AA on the textures and then AA basically on the geometry. Now we're going to see that plus a 2x2 super sample. Look at how much smoother it is. Look at the amount of information. It's the same amount of pixels, but the super sampled one had more information that was forced into those pixels. Effectively what's happening is with a 2x2 super sample is you have a quad of pixels, 4 pixels, and they are combined together to create the final output pixel. Really it's really simple stuff, but a lot of people just don't quite understand that. And for those who are familiar with super sampling, this is what you would consider a ordered grid algorithm. More advanced super samples with NVIDIA are like, off-grid and random grid. But basically what the game does is it records almost a panorama system, where if you've ever taken a panorama with a camera, you take a picture of the left, the middle, and the right, or anything else, and with a program it merges those together. What this does is it will take a picture, in a sense. In the background, your screen won't flicker around, but it will take a picture of the top left of the screen, top right of the screen, etc., and it will stitch those together, and then it will show it and dump it to disk. So what you can do is you can record, let's say you're on a laptop and you have, say, 1024 by 576, like a netbook level resolution, or a 720p screen, just to keep things a little bit easier to say. You have a 720p screen, you can still output like 8K resolution, like IMAX resolution, but the way it does it is it takes your screen resolution and takes a picture for everywhere on sort of the game field of view, and then merges those together to create the resolution. So normally, I'm going to use 3840 by 2160, and that is 4 times the resolution of 1080p. So it's a screen that is double wide and double high. And when you merge those together, you get what is known as a 2x2 super sample, where every pixel on your video actually represents sort of 4 pixels total in the game engine. An example of really smooth video can be shown here, which is one of the projects I did for Metaphor. And it's just one single shot, and you can see how smooth the video looks in the details. And here's a zoomed up image to show you just how smooth it looks. These 3840 by 2160 images are huge. Now to calculate how big your pictures are going to be, you can pretty much just go to your calculator, type in the resolution 3840 by 2160, and multiply by basically the bit depth in a sense, which would pretty much be 3, because 3 is going to be for each subpixel. So RGB is going to have 3 pixels, 3 subpixels per pixel, so you have red, green, blue. So your files are going to be 24 megabytes each. So if you have a video that is 24 by 120, then say your video is going to be 30 seconds long, that's 86 gigabytes, pretty much. It's huge. Now, next up, we have path to directory. Now, some of you may know I have a large hard drive. It's a RAID 10. So I have 4 3 terabyte drives in a RAID 10, so you get striping as well as mirroring. So here's my drive, Juggernaut, and it's just R. And in here I have a folder called Minema Movies. So I'm going to set this to R /Minema Movies. And so all my recordings and everything will be dumped into there. Next up, we have speed modifier. This isn't really needed, I think, because, like, for instance, you can just change the frame rate and then just slow it down if you want, or just plug in half the frame rate if you want. With this, you have to keep in mind that this is going to then, this comes before the frame rate. So if you're playing the game at half speed at 120 frames per second, to run it normally, you're going to end up being 240 frames per second. Capture limit frames, this is actually pretty useful, I found, because I was shooting a lot of 10, 15, and 20 second shots. So if you want, just calculate how long it's going to be for the amount of frames, so 120 frames per second by 10 seconds. Set it to 1200 and they'll automatically stop recording at 1200. You may want to do a little bit more so you can cut it off nicely. The next one here, to skip the GUI. This is useful, but it may cause an issue because if it skips, your game might still be moving. So if you're in the inventory, let's say you're with Camera Studio and you're using your inventory, while you're in your inventory, you're still going to be moving. And the game's just going to stop recording. So if you go back and check your frames, you're going to see there's a giant skip or a giant lapse in recording. The next one here, capture GUI prevent pause. I love this. So what this does is you can open up Minecraft and say you have a large project that's recording. Say, for instance, Crystalline took about 8 hours to capture. Now I happen to be napping during that, but if you're doing a project, maybe if it's going to take maybe half an hour or so and you want to watch something online, that's perfectly fine. Set this to true, save it, and then when you open up Minecraft and you're using Camera Studio, for instance, now with Camera Studio, it automatically places your cursor outside of the game window. So just click on your desktop for instance, and you can then mess with windows. You can move your Minecraft window off to the side, and inside the game engine, it's still rendering and it's still recording. Now the overlay is interesting. It will show basically your frame rate, your capture frame rate, I believe the amount of frames it's captured, estimated time it's been so far, things like that. And this option is basically just it'll be actually captured, because here this will be shown and then the frame will be captured in the background. So this option here is for the maximum distance of entities. So this is all your smoke, all your particles, all your, not blocks necessarily, but all your small items, floating items, mobs, any particle systems, that type of thing. The next option here is the actual amount of particles. So if you're doing a TNT explosion, a single TNT could create 15 particles or 15 sprites. Say you have 10,000 TNT and they're all creating those 15 sprites. So in this, you can actually see all that instead of it just being a TNT, moving off to the side and then creating a void. So this actually will show all those particles. And this actually will slow down the recording because there's a lot more to render, but at the same time, Minema doesn't skip. As I explained before, it will slow down and it will record what's needed to create it as smooth as possible. Now here's the option I mentioned before. If such true, this will force Minecraft to freeze until all visible chunks are fully loaded. Camera Studio or similar mods are highly recommended for this option, since smooth camera movements are almost impossible without. So this is, like it says, experimental, and I haven't gotten it to work all the time. This is where it will stop Minecraft, and it will load all chunks until it can record, basically. So it'll stop, and it will record only when all the chunks are loaded. But again, I haven't really found this to work very well. Maybe in a future update it will work. I recommend you simply set your view distance to extreme, leave it in the main menu or the pause menu, and then let Minecraft just load and then record. So after all that talking and all that configuring and all that, I wanted to finally show you Minema in its actual use. So we're in Minecraft, nothing really fancy, no mods besides what we have. And so all I'm going to do is load up my camera path that I just made. And all I'm going to do is hit F4, and you'll hear a pop sound like you're picking up an item. And you'll see on the top left all the information that we talked about before while configuring. You see the frame number, you see the frame rate, you see the real time of what it's actually lasting right now in real person. And then video is the amount of video time it's captured given the frame rate that I've set in the options. The name is just the name of the folder that you're going to be recording into. And so it's still recording even though Camera Studio was done. And it's really laggy this way because it's not really designed to be running live like this, because it can control your movement, but it can't control your mouse. So it's going to be super laggy right now. I'm getting 5 frames per second. So stick to Camera Studio or stick to a very specific movement speed depending on what you're doing. Until we have a real demo system like for Source or something, I would stick to just Camera Studio for right now. So after all that, thanks for watching at 4 FPS. Hope it was useful, and I'll see you later.